St. Patrick's Day looks safe. The streets are packed, the beer is flowing, the river runs green. But when everyone believes nothing bad can happen, that's when the cracks open. Noise becomes cover, alcohol becomes camouflage, and fatal decisions look completely ordinary until it's too late. Tonight, 3 true St. Patrick's Day stories. Each one starts like a celebration, and each one is more terrifying than the last. Story 1. The crowd that thought it was under attack. Savannah, Georgia, 2009. Savannah sits along the Atlantic coast in the southeastern United States. It's historic, walkable, and its St. Patrick's Day parade is one of the largest in the country. Hundreds of thousands of people flooding narrow downtown streets every March. On March 17, 2009, more than 300,000 people packed into the city's squares and along Bay Street. Balconies overflowed. Police were stationed on rooftops. The city was ready for almost anything. Almost. Around midday, near the parade route, a man in the crowd suddenly collapsed. At first, it didn't look unusual. Heat, alcohol, dehydration. On a day like that, fainting is routine. Then someone said they heard a pop, not a bang, not an explosion, just a pop. In a quiet room, that sound would mean nothing. But inside a crowd of hundreds of thousands, it meant everything. Someone yelled, "Gunshot!" And the atmosphere changed instantly. People ducked behind barricades. Parents threw themselves over children. Officers started scanning windows and rooftops, hands near their weapons. For several long minutes, Savannah believed it was under attack. Imagine standing there, music still playing somewhere behind you, drums echoing down the street, crowd pressing in from all sides. And suddenly you're trying to decide which way you'd run if bullets start coming. Helicopters circled. Buildings were searched. Police swept balconies and alleys, but no second shot came. No shooter was found. No weapon was recovered. That's because the man who collapsed hadn't been shot at all. He had suffered a spontaneous aneurysm rupture, a catastrophic medical event that can happen without warning and drop someone in an instant. And the gunshot? It was never confirmed. It may have been a balloon. It may have been a bottle. It may have been nothing at all. But here's the part that's a bit strange. Multiple people later insisted they heard gunfire. Some swore they saw someone running. Their hearts pounded. Their bodies reacted. Their brains filled in the rest. For several minutes in Savannah, Georgia, a joyful parade turned into what felt like a mass shooting in progress. There was no attacker, but the fear was real. Sometimes the horror isn't what actually happened. It's how quickly everyone believes that it did. That story shows how fragile a crowd can be. But the next one is worse, because this time, there really was a predator in the crowd, and no one realized it, not even the person who got into his car. Story 2. The Ride She Never Ordered. Columbia, South Carolina, 2019. Columbia, South Carolina is home to the University of South Carolina, and one of the Southeast's wildest St. Patrick's Street festivals in the Five Points District. On a March weekend in 2019, the area was flooded with college students. Temporary stages, green shirts, police on nearly every block. It didn't look dangerous. It looked like a sponsored party. 21-year-old Samantha Josephson had been out with friends all evening in 5 Points. Photos show her smiling in crowded bars under neon signs. Nothing about that night looks ominous at first glance. Around 2 a.m., she decided to go home. She ordered an Uber on her phone. A black Chevrolet Impala pulled up. It was exactly what she expected to see. A dark car, pulling up when her app said it would, stopping where she was waiting. She opened the back door and got in. No one grabbed her. No one forced her. No one screamed. Dozens of people were still in the street. It looked like the most normal thing in the world. But it wasn't her ride. The driver, Nathaniel Rowland, had been circling the nightlife district, watching for intoxicated passengers leaving alone and looking for the car they thought they'd ordered. Sometime between closing that door and realizing the mistake, the locks engaged. Child safety locks. No way to open the back doors from the inside. By the time she understood what was happening, she was trapped. Investigators later determined that Samantha's phone stopped moving normally shortly after she got inside the car. GPS data showed the vehicle leaving the busy Five Points district and heading out of Columbia, not toward her apartment, toward a remote, wooded area. Inside the car, evidence would later show she fought back. The only reason they caught the man guilty was because the next day Nathaniel Rowland was pulled over during a simple traffic stop, and Samantha's blood was found in multiple locations inside the vehicle, on the passenger seat, on the door, and on the ceiling. Investigators testified that there were deep scratches on Rowland's hands and neck, defensive wounds consistent with someone desperately trying to escape. Her phone was later recovered from the vehicle. So was her blood, and a knife. The autopsy revealed she had been stabbed multiple times. The attack was not instant. It was personal, violent, close. Prosecutors would later say that Samantha had realized the mistake almost immediately, that she likely attempted to get out, to call for help, to fight. But with child safety locks engaged and the car already moving, there was no way out. Security cameras helped piece together the timeline. Her actual Uber driver had arrived moments later, waiting, messaging, calling, before eventually leaving when she never appeared. Meanwhile, Rowland's vehicle was captured circling the area repeatedly before she entered. He wasn't there by accident. He was hunting. In 2021, a jury convicted Nathaniel Rowland of kidnapping and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA, surveillance footage, cell phone data. The car itself became the crime scene. What makes this story linger isn't just the brutality, it's how ordinary it looked at the beginning. A black car pulling to a curb, a girl opening a back door, a door closing, in the middle of a crowded street filled with police officers and thousands of people celebrating. No one screamed. No one chased the car. No one knew. This story shows how something very real can unfold in full view and still go completely unseen. But the final story is different, because this one isn't about a single moment. It's about a tradition. One millions of people photograph every year, without knowing how experimental it really began. Story 3. The experiment that became a tradition. Chicago, Illinois, the Green River. Every March in Chicago, Illinois, the Chicago River turns bright green. Crowds line the bridges along Michigan Avenue. Boats idle below, cameras hover overhead. It looks magical. But the tradition didn't begin as magic. It began as pollution control. In the early 1960s, Chicago faced a serious problem. Illegal sewage discharges were flowing into the river, and officials needed a way to trace where the contamination was entering the system. City plumbers began using fluorescent dye, a highly concentrated chemical tracer, pouring it into pipes to see where the bright green color surfaced. The dye worked. Actually, too well. The river turned a vivid, almost radioactive green that lingered for days. According to historical accounts, members of the Plumbers Union realized that if a small amount of that dye could color pipes so dramatically, imagine what it could do in the river on St. Patrick's Day. In 1962, they tried it. They dumped roughly 100 pounds of oil-based fluorescent dye into the Chicago River. The water glowed for nearly a week. Crowds loved it. Photographers loved it. The city embraced it. But environmentalists did not. At the time, the Chicago River was already heavily polluted. Industrial waste, sewage overflow, chemical runoff. And fluorescein, particularly in the quantities being used, raised concerns about ecological impact. By 1966, under pressure from conservation groups, the formula was changed. The city reduced the amount drastically and switched to a vegetable-based powder dye, one that officials now say is environmentally safe and used in much smaller quantities, roughly 40 pounds or less. Today, members of the Chicago Journeyman Plumbers Local 130 still perform the ritual, pouring the bright orange powder into the river from boats before it blooms into green. They guard the exact formula carefully. They call it harmless. And by modern environmental standards, it's considered safe. But that reassurance doesn't erase how this began. This tradition started as a way to trace human waste leaking into a river already burdened with sewage and industrial runoff. In the early years, oil-based industrial dye was dumped in heavy quantities, up to 100 pounds at a time, into water long considered unsafe for swimming or direct contact. This is the same river the city once reversed to protect its drinking water. And yet every March, families pack the bridges, boats slice through the neon current, kayakers paddle straight through it. Every so often, someone falls in. No, there was no confirmed mass illness tied to the dye itself. But historically, the river has carried elevated bacteria levels from sewage overflows and storm runoff. And still, the spectacle continues. That's what's unsettling. A chemical tracer once used to expose contamination turned into a photo opportunity, an industrial solution rebranded as tradition. The river glows, crowds cheer, and almost no one thinks about why it needed dye in the first place. So, the crowd in Savannah panicked over a threat that wasn't there. The girl in Colombia walked straight into a threat no one around her recognized. And in Chicago, an entire city cheered for a glowing river without really knowing why it glowed in the first place. Every one of these stories is real. No curse, no folklore, just one simple, uncomfortable truth. Luck doesn't protect you from physics, or locked doors, or chemicals in a river, or your own assumptions. So this St. Patrick's Day, remember, the most dangerous things don't always look dangerous at all. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you for watching. If you enjoy curious stories like this, consider subscribing. Until next time, good night.